So we're already recording. So this is just B-roll, I guess.
Yeah, it's just BS.
BS roll.
Yeah.
That's what I do during the day.
Right. That's right.
Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout, and if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long. Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast. Kenny and Ryan here today, and we're actually recording this in my house because, we've, when we talk to a lot of people, we usually go to the distillery or we do things over Google Hangouts, but, we've had quite a few authors on, and authors not ever always has an office to go to, and I'm actually very excited about today because we're going to be doing a different type of author and a different type of kind of story today. So, Ryan, kind of talk about it.
Yeah, and also we don't have enough Patreon supporters to get us a studio, so we're still in Kenny's house. No, I'm kidding. But no, super excited today to talk to James about his book. I'm just reading the back here briefly, and I think the story sounds fascinating. I'm interested to learn more about it because growing up in Nelson County, a lot of your family, I think what you're about to talk about dealt with the prohibition and stuff. So that's kind of been in my family's history from back in the day. So interested to talk to you about it and dig into it.
So with that, let's go ahead and introduce our guest. So today we have James Markert. James is the author of a new novel that is just now coming out to market called The Angel's Share. So James, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
So James, before we kick in and start talking about the book, kind of talk about maybe just your history with bourbon, right? I think that's one thing to always kind of get an idea of is where do you really, maybe where you got some of the inspiration? How did it affect you growing up? Was there a first bottle that you kind of found a infatuation with? Kind of give us some background.
Well, I guess my history with bourbon, I kind of came to the bourbon scene rather late. And, actually I really started liking bourbon when I was researching this book. And I guess I wrote the first draft of this about 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago. And that's when I started touring the distilleries and then trying all the different bourbons from each of them. And that, first I started with bourbon with Coke or, some kind of cola.
Like we all do.
Yeah. And then I, started having it on ice. And actually I like to drink it neat now, as long as it's good. But really it was just visiting the distilleries, and the number one thing, going into the aging houses and, smelling the angel share. And that's what inspired for me to write this book. So actually I thought of the title before I thought of the story. I think it was the Jim Beam distillery. That was the first one I visited with my wife and some friends. And we went into the aging house and they explained to us what the angel share was. And I said right there, that's the name of my next book. I don't have a story, but
and then you'll hear the term angel share at every other distillery you go to.
Right.
It seems like each tour you go to is like the same thing over.
Yes. And in each one of those tours, we would be in the group and they would say, does anybody know what this smell is? And I would raise my hand, angel share.
So let's rewind a little bit. So like, whose idea was it to go on the bourbon trail? Like, was it you? Is it a birthday?
It was a just group of friends said, we need to go. Mm-hmm. So we went, and once I went, I wanted to go to all of them.
So talk about, are you a Kentucky native? Is something that you had missed out on?
I missed out on it. I grew up here in Louisville. I went to DeSales High School. I went to U of L. So Kentucky native, born and bred. And I don't think I hit my first distillery until, what am I now, 43? I was probably 39, 40.
Yeah.
What's in your backyard,
I'm late to the bourbon scene.
You kind of take it for granted, and that's right there.
I know. That's what everybody, when my family comes into town, they're like, oh, what do you think of the Louisville Slugger Museum? I'm like, I don't know. I've been there.
I've never been there.
I've been there since I was in middle school.
But the first bourbon I ever tried was Old Forester. Mm-hmm. And that's the bourbon that's featured prominently throughout the book, just because it was one of the few bourbons to survive Prohibition.
So let's talk about the uniqueness of it, right? Because we've had Fred Minnick on and Chuck Cowdery and all these people that are maybe they wouldn't classify themselves as like Michael Veach as being a bourbon historian,
right?
But they're fact tellers, and they try to make
not really novelists.
And they try to make a story out of some of the facts. However, you kind of took an approach where this is purely pretty much fictional, right?
Right.
So kind of talk about that.
Well, I wanted to be as historically accurate as possible. But that's the one good thing I can, if I did miss something, I could always say, oh, it's fiction.
Yeah. well, most of the stories are fiction anyways.
Right.
Bourbon history,
you know what?
So.
That's what I found out. You listen to all these stories and they started, way back in the 18 whatevers. And I always wonder, how much of this is true?
It's like playing a game of telephone,
right.
Time it gets to the 10th person.
Yeah. And, my distillery in the book it's called the Old Sam McPhee Distillery in Twisted Tree, Kentucky. And, I just kind of had to imagine what it would have been like back then. And at the same time, I would, weave in what the feel of current distilleries, what they're like now, just to give you a little bit of sense of both.
Well, kind of talk about some of the background of the book itself. Like, how does the story start out, and, where does it take place, and kind of go a little bit more in depth with that.
Okay. Well, the story takes place in 1934, just after the repeal of Prohibition, in a fictional town called Twisted Tree, Kentucky. On the distillery, there's two trees that grew up side by side and ended up twisting into one another to form one tree, and that's why where the town got its name. But it's a year after Prohibition was repealed. The McPhee family, still lives on the distillery, even though it's been shut down, since 1920. And they're kind of reeling from the death of their youngest son, Henry, who was 4 years old and died in a car accident where the father, Barley, was driving. So Barley has basically spent the past year since his death sitting in his new Lazy Boy, because it just came out about that time, and drinking Old Forester and looking out his window at the neighboring potter's field, which is where they would bury most of the homeless. But usually the burials went unattended. Nobody would ever show up to him. But on the year anniversary of the son's death, there's a homeless man buried in the potter's field whose name is Asher Keating. And that night, there's about 300 to 400 homeless people come pay the respects, which gets Barley and his son William, who's 18 and a budding reporter, out of the house to figure out who this guy was. And it turns out that Asher was a homeless man who some people thought was Jesus. He helped, feed the other homeless. He helped clothe them. He would do it by stealing.
A little bit of Robin Hood, I guess.
Right. And he, some people say he performed miracles. Some people say he was more of a magician. Some thought he was crazy. Some, I never really answer what exactly Asher Keating was, other than he was kind. He was kind to people. But this gets the father out of his funk, and the son investigating, more about Asher Keating's life. So what happens is William, the oldest son and the main character of the book, he ends up going to the Courier-Journal and publishing. They buy his first story, and it's breaking news, and it's called "The Pottersfield Christ." But because of the times, it's during the Great Depression, people are looking for answers. People from all over start flocking to the woods and Twisted Tree, wanting to visit Asher's grave, because recently the McPhee's daughter had, won't give it away, but a minor miracle of her own. So people flock to the woods around the distillery, and they want to visit the grave, and it brings life back to the town. But even better, it brings life back to the distillery. So they start, filling the barrels again, loading up the aging house with bourbon. But the problem is the father was also a bootlegger and gangster during the 1920s under a different name. And now that the son has published this article and brought attention to the distillery, the gangsters know where he is.
Okay.
So along with bringing life back to the town, we talk about Al and George Remus up in Cincinnati. And so it brings danger back to Twisted Tree, along with, the life it brings to it. So the gangster in my book, the main one, his name is Tommy the Bat Barducci.
That's awesome.
He walks around with a Louisville Slugger.
That's real cool.
It's cool. It is kind of interesting because after Prohibition, there's a lot of small family distilleries probably that, just didn't recover. Mm-hmm. And, you see, we have that poster we got from Barton's of all the distilleries that have been in Kentucky, and you're like looking at all these names and, who didn't survive. So it seems like an interesting story just to kind of, I like where it's going. I think, with the Prohibition, the families, distilleries making a recovery and how that process went. Also with the homeless guy, I think it gives a little another.
Yeah. And, the whole issue with, when you start filling up the barrels again, you can't sell it right. You got to let it age. But there's a little twist in there that has something to do with Old Sam, the person who founded it. He actually, killed himself the day Prohibition started, and the feds came in and took his distillery. There's a little twist in there at the end with something he did.
Oh, okay. So, cool. We won't get that away. So I guess more about like just the distillery that was at the home. I mean, so it went defunct at Prohibition. And then from there, was it just the Potter's Christ that kind of really was the inspiration of the characters truly starting the distillery back, thinking that either it's a mechanism for financial reasons, or is it just for making the town budding again, whatever it is.
The son, William, he's tried his hand at being a reporter, and up until now, he's never been successful. The Courier's always turned down his articles. But deep down, his passion was always to be the next master distiller of Old Sam. And he'd been on his father for the whole past year of starting it again, and he just didn't want to do it. So it was, he was kind of pushing that along. And actually, once the people started coming, he just decided that he was going to do it on his own. He and the wife, he and his mother. And once they started doing it, that's what got Barley. He said, well, I don't know if they're going to do it right. So I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to, go ahead and get this thing started again. Because Barley, the reason he became a bootlegger is, he watched all his father's, Old Sam, bourbon get taken and kind of get, siphoned out of the collection houses and sold elsewhere. And he said, if somebody's going to sell my father's bourbon, it's going to be me, even if it was illegal.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a really, really interesting tale about how you brought in the bootlegging, because that was actually you said you mixed in a lot of pieces of history into this, because as a lot of people do know, that Prohibition was a time when during the 1920s when George Remus, Al Capone were very prominent people.
Right.
Even here in Louisville, you can go and you can stay downtown and you can go visit the Rathskeller, this at the Seelbach, and you can listen to all those stories.
And they still have the Old Forester Prohibition at the Fraser Museum.
They might still. I don't remember, but I mean, it's interesting how you did all that. It was the idea of having the gangster twist into it, just as you said, a way to bring some more suspense and thriller kind of pieces into it.
For sure. And I love the time period, the 1920s. I think I watched a lot of Boardwalk Empire and Peaky Blinders while I was writing it. But I'm just a big fan of the whole, Prohibition, Roaring Twenties, the gangsters, and I like to put gangsters in any book that I can.
So it was pretty easy to come up with the name Barley, right? Because it's just,
Right.
So kind of talk about any other inspirations for characters or anything like that.
I don't know. I guess, books kind of come in pieces. And I think the first thing I wanted to do, I had the title first. I called it The Angel's Share. And then I knew I wanted to do historical. And so I just imagined the distillery first. And that's when the name Barley came to me. And I think at the time I was reading an article on, I think it was somebody from St. X who did a documentary about a potter's field. So that kind of clicked in, and I thought, okay, I'll have a potter's field right next to the distillery. And from that, it just kind of grows, and you add layers to it. And each rewrite, you add more. And, I don't even know where some of the names come from. It's
just from thin air.
Right.
Is it typical to come up with a title first?
I don't know. I only know what I do. So it's not typical. It's, I guess, not typical for me. That's the only book that I've done where I have the title first. Mm-hmm. Usually I'll have either a character first or the premise and some of the plot. But that's the first one that I've done where I had the title first.
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point-of-sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point-of-sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon.
So about how long did it take you to research and put this thing together?
I think I researched probably for 2 months.
That was the fun part, though.
Or less.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because, the research was visiting the bourbon distilleries
Right.
and reading books on it. And but I'm more, I get too impatient. Some people can research for months before they write a book. I can't do that. I have to write. I have to start the story. So what I do is I'll research a lot as I go along. So, I might write myself to a certain point and, like Barley's Lazy Boy chair. And, I was like, okay, was that even there back then? And so I researched that and you say, yes, it was. So I'll put that in there and move on. So I do a lot of researching as I go.
Was there any particular distilleries, like I guess history or story, that might have inspired you to, to come up with
the distillery that I visited that I think envisioned the most for this was the Woodford.
Woodford? Okay.
Yeah. Probably one of my favorite tours was the Buffalo Trace. I think what was neat about that is I went there one day with my friend and we were just walking around and this barrel just rolls out right in the middle of nowhere, rolls, across the run into another building. And I thought that was pretty neat seeing that in action. Plus, the second time I went there on the tour, our guide said, all right, I want y'all to all look over there in the corner. That's a barrel of Pappy right there. And they had to keep us away from it.
I was going to say, were you a Freddy by any chance? So I guess the one thing that we always love is we love Woodford. The distillery in itself is just so iconic.
Oh, yeah.
Quintessential Kentucky.
Yes.
I agree. As you're driving up to it, you see the rolling fields, you see the horse farms, and not only that, as it's a very clean operation where everything is kind of always where you expect it to be. So kind of talk about some more inspirations from the distillery and like how that mapped into the book or the story as well. Is it anything that goes into the process of the making bourbon that was into it or anything like that?
Well, just at each distillery, seeing it ferment and bubble in the big vats, and you go in there and you smell the corn. And so I wanted to make sure when I wrote the book that I really, really gave it a sense of smell and where you could really picture what everything looked like. And more than anything that inspired me, and a lot of times when I'm thinking of a story, I'll think of what it would be like as a movie. And when I did go to Woodford, I saw the campus there and leading up to it, and I thought, okay, if this is ever a movie, this is where I want it filmed. They're just maybe no guest for a couple of weeks and just shoot it. But to me, that was, like you said, that was an iconic place to go. But, I just tried to be as authentic as possible with the entire, process of making the bourbon.
So talk about some more, I guess we haven't touched into more like any your other publications or other things that you've done. So people kind of just know more about you as an author.
Right. Well, I've been writing for about 15 years. I've written about 10 books. The last book, White Wind Blue, it came out in 2013. That was the first book to go out, across the country. And that one takes place in 1929 at Waverly Hills.
You do have a fascination with the 20s there, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I like the time period, and not everything I write is going to, actually my next book is set in 1920, but not everything I write will be
what is it about the
period.
20s you like so much?
Like I said, I think it's Prohibition and Roaring 20s and gangsters, and I don't know. I just
bootlegging in general.
Yeah.
See, now the only thing we bootleg are like movies. Right?
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, like the DirecTV boxes or whatever.
Yeah, that was in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
You'd hack DirecTV boxes.
But the Waverly book, White Wind Blue, I mean, I'm still doing book clubs. 3 years later, I'm still doing book clubs locally of people really get into that book. But that one's about a doctor there at Waverly who, they don't have a cure for TB, so he tries to heal people by playing music. So he'll walk around bedside with a violin and play, and ultimately ends up forming an orchestra at the sanitarium. But that was my first one to go out.
I have yet to go there. I'm too scared.
I've only been there once. I was there for a couple hours researching, and it's a fascinating place.
Yeah, tell our listeners about Waverly Hills just in case, because they could visit it, I guess, if they. If they're into spooks.
If you pay them, you can go.
Yeah, and I guess Halloween season is actually when it really.
Well, that's the biggest one because they have their haunted house, and they pretty much do tours, I think, for the whole year, and they stay packed. It's hard to get in. But initially when I went there to visit, I was wanting to write a scary novel. But once I got there, I was just kind of taken in by the history of the place and the architecture, and thought that, something needed to be written, kind of honor the people who lived and died there and worked there, as opposed to what it's known for now, which is mostly supernatural type stuff.
So I want to get back to the actual book and why you're here today. So kind of talk about more about like what this book really means to you in regards of bringing maybe the first that I know of a fictional story, that kind of brings in a lot of the history of the bourbon industry in itself.
It's nothing that I didn't go into it
thinking that you were a revelation or something.
Right. But I'm slowly realizing that it is.
Yeah.
I didn't even look into it to see if it was the first bourbon novel. But it might be. It's pretty neat because, I'm getting a lot of attention from, whiskey and bourbon writers. And I knew it would do pretty well locally just because of what it is. But I'm anxious to see what kind of life it takes on as the word gets out.
So how's the bourbon community? How are they embracing this? Like you and Fred make boys now, or are they like, damn it, we should have thought of that?
No, well, it's pretty neat because my publicist at my publisher, she's handling all the media, and I said, well, I'll help out too, and I'm going to start contacting bourbon bloggers, whiskey bloggers. Sending out press releases, and it's funny how it seems like they're all connected somehow. Because I've heard from whiskey bloggers. I've heard from 3 in Ireland, 2 in Scotland, about 4 from England, and they're all asking for the book. Like I got up this morning, and there's a blogger from Scotland asked for the copy of the book cover so he can put it out on his social media. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, you were telling about that story about their Instagram account where they take bottles of whiskey.
Yeah, there's another one. It's called Whiskey with a View. On Instagram, they have 57,000 followers. And they basically, it looks like they take different bottles of bourbon and they set it out in nature. I mean, beautiful scenery behind the bottles, really nice pictures. But they said that they wanted to do a photo shoot with the book. So I'm going to make sure I get them a copy of the book and see what.
Nice, clean copy.
Nice, clean copy. I don't want any provocative poses.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's very interesting because it also takes almost, because, you said, Ryan hinted at, Fred Minnick and all these people, they're authors, but I also think it takes a different kind of author, right? A different kind of imagination to be able to put together a story like this, right?
Right. And I think that's the main thing is, even though it is a bourbon and whiskey themed novel, and the cover, I think the cover really pops. That can't be the story. So I think the story revolves around and has a lot to do. Every thread in the story might weave through the bourbon aspect and the distillery parts, but it has to be I didn't think it could be the main main story, and the characters would have to take care of that. But I think that, I blended the two together as best I could.
Yeah, there's only so much you can talk about the process of making bourbon.
Exactly.
It's 51% corn. And,
right. And I do get into
stereotypical.
that. But if I had tried to write a novel about that, I might get some people to buy it, but how many people would say this is good?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by writers because I've wanted to be a writer, but I can't even daily journal. And so, talk about your writing process, because a few authors I admire, I'd love digging into their process. How is yours?
Well, mine's kind of all over the place. I definitely don't outline. I know a lot of authors outline. I can't do it. To me, I don't have the patience to sit down and outline a book. And I don't really know exactly where I want to go with it. And I found that when I try to outline, sometimes some parts become too contrived because you're trying to get to that next point on the outline instead of just kind of letting it go. So what I do is I take notes. If I'll think of a line of dialogue that might happen 3/4 of the way through the book, and I'll write it down. Or I might think of a scene that I want to happen here. I'll just write it down, and that they're all in a big stack, or scattered on a piece of paper, and it looks like a mess, but I know where everything is. And generally, I'll finish a chapter and write what I want to happen in the next one or two, and then go that maybe a mini outline and go from there. But I'm a fast writer. I wrote the first draft of The Angel Share in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And then I spent another 9 months rewriting it about 5 times. But I could, in my new book coming out in next January, I wrote that in 5 months. So I could probably write 2 books a year.
Wow,
That's
awesome.
impressive.
Yeah.
So I guess what is this book really taught you? You kind of talked about the community in general, but what has this book kind of taught you about bourbon? And is this something that you're growing more of a infatuation with just in bourbon in general, just because of it?
Yes, you just look on top of my refrigerator. But yeah, I mean, I like I was more of a beer drinker, and
There's nothing wrong with that.
no, but once I started doing my so-called finger quotes here research, visiting the distilleries and getting a bottle from each one, it's not just I like the taste of most of it, but to me it was something about the bottles. I mean, how neat some of the bottles are, and just the color of the bourbon inside of it. I like all of it. It's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's like a Pandora's box once you open it.
And there's so many different kinds, and it's fun.
So I guess a good question is this going to be the last bourbon novel you might ever write? Are you thinking?
I don't know.
You thinking about maybe how you can take a twist on
if this one really takes off, maybe I'll do a
sequel.
The Angel Share, aged double O or something.
Double O.
I like it.
But what I do plan on doing, the bourbon in the Angel Share, my fictional bourbon is called Old Sam. Mm-hmm. And I've already done this with the next book I've finished. They drink Old Sam. So every book that I write from here on out, the characters are going to drink Old Sam.
So is an Old Sam a 4-year, a 6-year? What's the proof?
Well,
bottled in bond.
That's what I'm going to. It's bottled in bond. I'm going to have to sit down and really think about it. I'm trying to remember what I put in there. I think they usually aged it 4 to 6 years.
It fits the description. Then.
Yeah,
there you
exactly.
go.
Right. So but I plan to make Old Sam live on through all the other books. I'm even tinkering with the idea of doing Old Sam McPhee bourbon T-shirts, hats, whatever. It'd be neat if it was a real bourbon.
Yeah.
If the book takes off.
Be popping on TTB here soon.
There you go.
It's just you would have to find aged bourbon and call it that, because it's if I wanted to make my own bourbon now, then I have to sit on it for 4 to 6 years.
Just call him GP.
Somebody will feel.
Won't have any hair by then.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and we'll start wrapping this up. So anybody that wants to get the book, kind of how do they get their hands on it, and kind of what do you want to leave them with?
Well, you can get it anywhere. It's on Amazon. It's on all the ebook channels. As far as local, the only store that's not carrying it, I think, is Books A Million. But Barnes & Noble has it. I know the Barnes & Noble at the Summit has a ton of them. Carmichael's has a bunch. We just did a nice event with them last Saturday at Third Turn Brewing. It was a good time. I think I sold about 100 books.
And so anybody that's out there nationwide, make sure you do check it out on Amazon. It's called The Angel Share by the author James Markert.
Right, and you should be able to get it at all the Barnes & Nobles across the country, and especially in the South. A lot of the Southern independent stores ordered a bunch.
Awesome. So, well, this is great because I think you are bringing a unique twist to this, right? Because, the guests that we always have on are the ones that are in the industry, right? The ones that are talking about the facts behind it, and maybe some of the fiction behind it as well. But this is a true fictional novel that takes the best of, the history that we have. And as you said, weaves them together to actually make a good coherent story out of it. So,
those are your experts, and I get to pretend to be an expert. That's what fiction is, I guess.
You take the easy route. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
Don't work harder, work smarter.
That's right.
So if you like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And follow us on those great social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @Bourbon Pursuit.
Yeah, James, thanks for taking the time. I'm fascinated by the story. I can't wait to dig into this novel and find more about the miracles and, the angel share. So
thanks for having me. I can talk fiction and bourbon anytime.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And to the listeners, if you have any show suggestions, feedback, comments, we love hearing from you. We bring this content for you guys. So just let us know what you want to hear and we'll bring it to you. So we'll see you next time.